What's good everybody, this is CP and welcome to a very special video. Today let's look at young players with potential to break out in the 2022-23 NHL season. Now this video will not only be a very good watch for the average NHL fan, but I also think that it's going to be helpful for those who play fantasy hockey, as it might be able to help you find a few fantasy sleepers and breakout stars to stack up your teams this season. So the first player I'm going to talk about is Kaliyev of the LA Kings. As a 20-year-old rookie seeing most of his playing time in the fourth line or bottom six role, Kaliyev was still able to get 14 goals and 13 assists in 80 games. And overall, I feel like this kid is too good to be in that type of role, just my personal opinion. But if he's able to build on last year, I think he has the potential to be a legit top 6 forward in the NHL someday. Better yet, if the Kings gives him an opportunity to be elevated into the top 6, or even see some more power play time, I seriously think Kaliyev can easily be an 18 to 20 goal and 35 to 40 point player. Now the real question for me is whether the Kings believe in Kaliyev as much as I do. If so, then getting more playing time with better players in the top 6 could potentially break him out and potentially making him one of the biggest surprises out of the Western Conference in the NHL this year. Next, I have Quinton Byfield, who is also another young player on the LA Kings with breakout potential. Now, coming into this season, I'm actually not as high on him as Kaliev. I feel like his development might be a little bit slower. However, I still see a lot of upside in this player. Keep in mind that he's still very young and he'll be barely 20 years old heading into this season. Since he was a former second overall pick from the Kings, I feel like Los Angeles is very high on him and they'll probably give him plenty of opportunities to eat this year. And roster-wise, he also doesn't have to play against the top competition yet, since the Kings still have Kopitar and Philip Deneau operating the top 2 lines. And playing against the other team's 3rd or 4th best center should help make things easier in terms of getting points and developing at the NHL level. Right now, the bar is definitely not high for Byfield, as he only had 5 goals and 10 points last year. However, I feel like Kings fans should be more excited about this player this season, as he'll probably have an opportunity to play a full 82 game season ahead. Optimistically speaking, I don't think it'll be hard for Byfield to possibly triple or maybe even 4x his point production. If I had to guess, I could see him being a 12 to 16 goal and maybe 30 to 35 point guy this year. Next, I'll go down to Denver and take a look at 2 young players who I think can have big years for the Colorado Avalanche. First player is Alex Newhook. Newhook is already coming off a pretty respectable first full season in the NHL, as he scored 13 goals and 33 points in 71 games. He's also still pretty young at 21, and if Nazem Kadri is 100% gone, then I personally think that Newhook is ready to step in as the team's number 2 center. Despite only playing 13 minutes a night last year, Newhook was actually averaging around 0.46 points per game. So let's prorate that and let's assume that he's going to become a 20-minute center. I obviously don't expect to see him put up Nazem Kadri numbers right away this upcoming season, but to me, 20 goals and 50 points should be a very reasonable target for Newhook, especially with the type of players they have on the Colorado Avalanche roster. On defense, I feel like Bowen Byram of the Avalanche is another young player set to have a huge year this upcoming season. Byram only played 30 games last year, but overall he looked like a very solid top 4 defenseman for the Avalanche on most nights. It's also crazy, but I sometimes forget how young he is, as he's only born in 2001. And at that age, most NHL teams would be lucky if their prospect is developing nicely in the AHL. Obviously, points and scoring is not the only thing to look at when judging a defenseman, but Byram did have 17 points in 30 games last year. So if he's able to stay healthy and play a full season for the Avalanche, I could honestly see him have a shot to be a 45 to 55 point D-man for the team this year. To put things into perspective, Cale Makar had 86 points for the Avalanche last year, and Devon Toews had 67 last year. So if anything, it seems like getting points as a defenseman is probably easier in a Colorado Avalanche uniform than most teams around the NHL. Am I too high on Byram, or do you think he's going to have a breakout year and be the team's 2nd best defenseman behind Cale Makar? Next, we'll go down to Arizona and take a look at center Barrett Hayton. I know the Coyotes probably won't be any good this year, but to be quite honest, they still need players to score and play first line or second line minutes. So to me, Barrett Hayton might be one of those guys. He played 60 games last year and managed to score 10 goals and 24 points. Obviously, those aren't amazing stats, but to be fair, he played on a very bad Arizona Coyotes team. However, he's still quite young, and I feel like 10 goals and 24 points is a good foundation for him to build on. Because right now, besides Clayton Keller, I would argue that Hayton might be the second or third most important offensive player on the Arizona Coyotes. And from the looks of their projected lineup, he is probably their most important center heading into this season. Coyotes are obviously in no rush to win right now, so there's a chance that they will use this upcoming season to give Hayton a chance to prove his worth by putting him in the top 6 with plenty of opportunities to succeed. Hayton is 22 and is a former high pick at 5th overall, so it looks like he might be at that perfect age where he's able to break out and come into his prime. If that's the case, I could see a huge year for him for setting new career highs across the board, even though the Coyotes might have a hard time winning a lot of games this year. Moving on, I think Matt Boldy of the Minnesota Wild might be another sneaky breakout candidate to watch out for this upcoming season. Since there are so many good offensive players in the West, he might fall under the radar in terms of publicity and fantasy drafts. And some of you may not realize this, but as a rookie, he was averaging over 0.80 points per game. He finished with 15 goals and 39 points for the Wild in only 47 games. Had he played the whole season, I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a 20 goal and 55 point rookie for the Minnesota Wild last year. And heading into this year, I feel like there's a lot to like about Boldy in terms of his role. I feel like it's going to continue to grow in the Minnesota Wild's lineup. And if he gets an opportunity to break into the top 6 and play more meaningful minutes with more talented players like Kaprizov, then there's no doubt I can see a huge breakout year for Boldy in Minnesota. Based on his rookie stats alone, I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a 25 goal and possibly a 65 point plus player. Maddie Beniers of the Seattle Kraken is another young forward to keep an eye on in the West in my opinion. He only played 10 games last year and looked pretty good. He showed plenty of potential to become a huge franchise piece for the Kraken for years to come. And obviously right now he has more help now in Seattle with the addition of guys like Burakovsky, Borgstrand, and Justin Schultz. And being one of the best prospects in the Kraken system, I feel like he'll be given lots of opportunities to produce in a meaningful role. Personally, I don't really know the ceiling of Beniers since we don't have too much of a sample size right now. And I could be completely wrong, but if he gets top 6 minutes all year, then I think 20 goals and 50 points should be a reasonable target for him to hit in my opinion. Now going up north to Vancouver, I feel like they could have 2 players who can come up huge for them this year. First player in my books is Andrei Kuzmenko. Well, he's not exactly young at 26, but I still consider him somewhat of a rookie as he has played exactly 0 games in the NHL so far. Obviously, he was one of the most sought after players outside of the NHL last year. Assuming NHL teams like the Edmonton Oilers and the Canucks have done their homework right, I feel like there's good reason to believe that Kuzmenko is going to put up some points in the NHL. I'm not sure exactly how much, but in his last season in the KHL with St. Petersburg, he was over a point per game with 53 points and 20 goals in 45 games. So if his offensive talents translate in the NHL, I feel like the Canucks have gotten themselves an extra weapon on offense. And obviously, I'm not saying that he's going to make the same type of impact as Kaprizov did with Minnesota in his first year. But in Kaprizov's first year in the NHL, he was almost a point per game player with 51 points in 55 games. So let's assume that Kuzmenko is as good as he's advertised. And to be conservative, let's say he might be slightly worse than Kaprizov. Then I still think 40 to 45 points should be the goal for someone like him in his situation. Otherwise, I don't think Vancouver and Edmonton would have gone after him as hard as they did. Next up, another young player I'm high on is Vasily Podkolzin of the Canucks. He finished his first year in the NHL with 14 goals and 26 points in 79 games, which isn't amazing statistically, especially for a former 10th overall pick. But to give him the benefit of the doubt, it was probably a huge change for Podkolzin last year as he had to move to a new country and play in the best league in the world. Also, if you watch any Canuck games closely, you can definitely tell that there is a player there, especially in his last 15 and 20 games last season. Podcosin definitely looked better than a 26-point player. In my opinion, he has the skill set and the talent to be a legit top 6 forward for the Canucks someday. It's just whether he's able to figure it out in time. If he does, I can see him being a legit 25 goal scorer in the NHL for many years. Ideally, next season he earns more ice time, breaks into the top 6 and plays with better line mates. And if all things work out for Podcosin, I could definitely see him with upside to be a 50-point player as early as next year. Moving on to the Edmonton Oilers, I think there are 2 players that I would focus on in terms of breakout or having a big year. The first player I think many should keep an eye on is Ryan McLeod, as I feel like he has the ability to surprise the average NHL fan next year. He only had 9 goals and 21 points last year, but ask any Oiler fan and they'll tell you that this kid has potential to be special. He has great speed, skill, and hockey IQ, and to be quite frank, in a lot of games he looked too good to be a third-line winger / center. Obviously, with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl there, it'll be hard for McLeod to break into the top 6. However, in my opinion, he can still easily double his production to be an 18 goal and 40 point guy, cause to be quite honest, if he stays in the third line role, he's not facing the other team's best defenders or centers, and I feel like the competition might be a little easy for him. But in order to be a more productive player in the NHL, I feel like he needs to improve his offensive instincts to capitalize on more plays and cash in on more scoring opportunities. And he might not be a 60-point guy as early as next year, but if the Oilers do run into some bad luck with injuries, or if McLeod can somehow push his way into the top 6, then I think he has potential to be a 25 goal, 60-point player. Maybe I'm crazy, but for Oiler fans, do you think I'm too high on Ryan McLeod? Next Oiler I want to talk about is defenseman Evan Bouchard. Statistically, he had a very impressive first season as a full-time NHLer. In 81 games, he had 12 goals, 31 assists, and 43 points. Impressively, he was able to do all that with limited power play time on the Oilers' lethal first unit. In fact, 10 of his 12 goals came on the even strength. Obviously, Bouchard has plenty of room to grow, especially defensively. But looking at things from an offensive standpoint or from a fantasy hockey standpoint for those who play, Bouchard might be one of those sleeper breakout D-man to look out for. The way I see it, he has a legit shot to hit 60 points next year on a few conditions. 1, if he's able to elevate to be a full-time first unit power play guy, and 2, improve his passing ability, especially to make better long-range passes or set up his teammates for better scoring opportunities in the own zone. It also doesn't hurt that he gets to play with 2 of the best forwards in the game. In short, if things pan out, I expect a nice improvement in points, goals, and assists for Bouchard. What do you think about these potential breakout candidates in the Western Conference? And who do you think will have the biggest year next season? Also, if you feel like I missed anyone, make sure you let me know in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree with everything I said in this video? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. And if you like, feel free to call me out as well. If you want to watch more of my crappy videos, then make sure you click the links on the side right here.